Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. My name is Brian Calley. I'm the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan, and kind of flying solo today. I actually have a guest, but flying solo without Sarah. So let me take the part that she normally does, which is to say thank you to Consumers Credit Union, who is our sponsor. It's been a great partner with the Small Business Association of Michigan, a great financing solution for our members going back. We really got to know them during the depths of the pandemic, and so they sponsor our briefing all year. We're so thankful for them. So you can check them out, links through to our website at any time. Also, one of our excited about our conversations today, our conversation with our guest today, because SBM has a very long-term relationship with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. Anybody watching this probably already knows that, but one of the things that we're on a mission to do is to ensure that our members who are insured through Blue Cross and Blue Care Network, that they understand all of the different tools and resources that are available to you and to your employees being on those plans. So first, let me just say a welcome. Chelsea Moore, thank you so much for joining with us. Chelsea works for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. She's the product manager on the solution management team. And we're going to talk a little bit about virtual primary care today. So thank you so much, Chelsea, for joining us. So the first thing is just what is virtual primary care?
Yeah, it's a big question right now. And something that we're super excited about. So we have partnered with Teladoc Health. We've had a partner with Teladoc Health already in our condition management space for some time. A lot of you may even recognize them as Livongo, which is a company that Teladoc acquired quite a few years ago. And so we've been partnered with them for quite some time. And in the last few years, I think with the pandemic and everything, it skyrocketed people's willingness and wanting to be able to continue to see their doctors virtually. And so virtual primary care, it's nothing complicated. It is primary care. The primary care that you know and love today. You have a doctor, you have a care team. And instead of, driving in the office and sitting in the waiting room, you are doing it from the comfort of your home. But for all intents and purposes, it works just like primary care does.
Yeah, and is one of the things, maybe a positive thing that came out of all the difficulty and strife of the pandemic, was it forced the adoption of things that were kind of happening out there. The idea of telemedicine or virtual healthcare was something that was happening somewhat, and there was an adoption curve that in normal times it actually would have looked kind of impressive in how fast it was being adopted. And then all of a sudden overnight, it became such an important piece of the puzzle. So would it be fair to say that it's no longer really a pandemic era piece of the puzzle, but it's just a regular part of healthcare today?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a perfect way of saying it. A regular part of healthcare. We I don't want to say joke, but joke a lot that the pandemic did for digital health and virtual care what we couldn't have imagined in 10 or 15 years. The level of adoption that people are accustomed to now, and the way that people are embracing virtual care and saying, hey, wait a minute, I really liked this during the pandemic. I'd like to continue to do this.
So give us a sense for what type of member would benefit from this type of care. Are you seeing in the adoption? Where are you seeing this utilized most?
Yeah, so lots of different places. I think there's a bit of a mystery out there of who's really going to use this, right? And I think a lot of people too are concerned, and providers are concerned, this is going to take away from the patients that I see. And that's just not the case. The virtual aspect of any sort of care has both convenience and access built into it, which is two really big problems that we see in primary care today. From a convenience perspective, you have to take off work, you have to, physically go to the doctor, you have to wait for the doctor. This is an afternoon or a morning or a couple of hours out of your day. And not a lot of people have that kind of flexibility with their job. From an access perspective, this just opens up for us to have more providers available to our members. We're seeing a huge access problem since coming off of the pandemic, especially where there just aren't enough primary care providers. For members that even have a relationship with a PCP today, it's still a 3-month wait time just to have their annual physical. And for a member that doesn't have that relationship today, it could be 6 or 9 months before they can get into a doctor to be seen. So the convenience and access is kind of the two main value points that we talk about when we talk about virtual care. But from a demographic perspective, I think you'd be surprised. When we were first rolling this out, we were trying to identify and focus on some of our group customers that had that higher millennial population, figuring like 2 + 2 = 4 here, right? But really what the data is showing is that it is like 40 to 55 is the age demographic of people that love to use these virtual services. And when you get into the Medicare world, it's even larger. And that came as a pretty big shock to us. That's not to say that people of all ages aren't using the service and that millennials specifically aren't seeking these services out. But that kind of, working parent, they're caring for their children. They may even be caring for their parents at that time, and don't really have a lot of time to care for themselves and get their health taken care of, are just jumping onto these virtual solutions. So we're super excited about that.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. I mean, being in that age group myself, the 40 to 55, that, never in my life have I been as busy as I am in this. Those are prime professional working years. And then also you throw on top of it kids of a certain age. And that's really they're just so busy. And I think about, every once in a while, I'd like to get on my kids' calendar when it's not like taking them someplace, because they're just so busy all the time. So yeah, I'm not really surprised that that's and plus when you take from an adoption curve standpoint, technology that is utilized, whether as we're utilizing some of that technology today, which become secondhand to so many people.
Right.
Whereas before it was like, yeah, you try to get people to adopt. Way back in the olden days, I was a banker, and I remember when ATMs were kind of a new innovation, and what people ever really kind of embraced that as something. Now, of course, they're commonplace. It's just so it just like that whole adoption curve time period, we just were able to skip because we didn't have any choice.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. And the other thing that I think we get a lot of questions on, or we can myth bust a little bit, is kind of back to the provider space and having them feel as if we're taking patients away. There could be patients that see a traditional PCP today and just decide, I really like the convenience and access of virtual better. Absolutely. But there are so many people, when we look at our book of business and our group specifically, a lot of them have 60, 70, even 80+% of their members that did not see a primary care provider last year, did not get their health maintenance exam done, didn't get any blood work done. And those are the people that we are really trying to outreach for a solution like this. Again, to touch on the access and convenience, but if we can make it as simple as possible for people to just get their primary care, we can really make a huge difference. We're talking about being able to diagnose things like diabetes earlier and hypertension earlier, other illnesses that these members may have that are just going undiagnosed and unwatched altogether because it's just a hurdle to get to see your doctor.
So if somebody were to say, what, actually, this sounds really convenient, I think I'd like to try this and maybe catch up on some of that healthcare. How would you even get started to kick the tires on it?
Yeah, it's super easy. Not to sound like a salesperson here, but it's very easy. I think Teladoc has really shown as being not only a leader in the telehealth space, but a leader because they care about the member experience. I think most people out there have at least utilized virtual care for an urgent care matter. You're up, kind of sick late at night. Maybe you have one of the kids at home and you just need that amoxicillin or somebody to provide you with a prescription. So it works virtually the same way. You're able to register your account. You link your insurance information if it's something that is covered by your benefits. And from there, you're able to see a primary care provider within like 5 to 7 days. They provide you with a welcome kit. So you also get a blood pressure cuff and a thermometer so that they can check some of the vitals. Just like your normal PCP, they'll send you out to get your lab work done prior to the appointment. And then, of course, if for whatever reason you need any type of in-person care following that visit, they can even help you get scheduled for that. So if they wanted someone to see a cardiologist, for instance, they would be able to see in-network providers, preferred providers from a quality perspective, and even help with the scheduling if you needed help with the scheduling.
Leading Edge, Chelsea Moore, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. Thank you so much for being on and sharing some of the some practices. Maybe some of our members are 1,250 groups and about 30,000 plus covered lives, and the SBM Blue Cross and Blue Care Network plans may not be available still, or may not be aware still available as a permanent ongoing service as opposed to just a pandemic era response.
Yes.
Chelsea, thank you so much for being with us.
Yes, no, thank you guys for the time. Let me know if there's anything I can help with.
All right, very good. Well, actually,
Brian, I'm back now. I wanted to let you know I have solved my sound issues, so apologies for that. And thanks for starting off the show without me today. Sounds like you and Chelsea had a good conversation.
We did. Yep. Thank you. And no worries. And now there's proof that you didn't just sleep in today.
I just woke up. You're right. 3:10. It's a new record. I'm not sure I even did that in college. So why don't you give us an update on what's been going on in Lansing this week?
Yeah, we've so there are a couple of things I wanted to cover today from a political and a policy perspective. Actually, one in court. So if you remember, seems like a long time ago, but in January and February, we were kind of duking out this issue on the income tax that baked into Michigan law was a requirement that when state revenues went up a certain amount, if it hit a certain threshold, then the income tax rate that individuals and small businesses pay would be rolled back. And there was an effort to try to cancel that rollback, which would be about between a $600 and $700 million tax cut for individual and small business ratepayers, or taxpayers. And that was a multi-month fight, and we were able to really essentially win it in the legislature. So in other words, preserved it in the legislature, this reduction in the income tax rate. And but then unfortunately at that point, the Attorney General came out with an opinion saying, yes, the rate's going to go down, but it's only 1 year. And according to her interpretation of the Michigan law, the rate can go back up automatically next year to its original rate. And Treasury, of course, adopted this position and have announced that this is just a temporary 1 year decrease of the rate. So now there was a lawsuit that was filed. We covered that on a briefing previously, and the lawsuit is really it explores several different potential arguments on it, but the first is, or the one that really seems to be focused in the Mackinac Center was kind of the lead, a nonprofit that is a lead on this lawsuit, and it's in process now, so it's been challenged in court. There was a case or a lawsuit, and then a response, and then a response to the response. And I just thought I'd share a little bit with it. What the position in the brief, it naturally takes the position that we did, which is that it's a permanent. In the law, it's a permanent tax cut. The idea that it bounces back up doesn't really make sense. It's not supported by the words that are in the law, and so naturally it makes that argument and the interpretation of it. But also argues that Michigan lawmakers, and by the way, a few Michigan lawmakers are part of the lawsuit, saying that that making new laws and changing laws is a power of the legislature, and the executive branch just can't change the law without a new law passing. And so it argues that Michigan lawmakers are entitled to accurate revenue estimates, and this has to do with the timing. So I remember this being an issue early on, which was like, well, if they're just announcing that the rates will go up in January, nobody's been harmed yet by this decision. So is there grounds yet for a lawsuit? And by adding lawmakers into the lawsuit, they're able to make the case that yes, they have to know now. This has to be settled ahead of time, because come September, the lawmakers will pass a budget that goes into next year. So October 1st through September 30th of each year is the state's fiscal year. So this, what the lawsuit is saying is look, the lawmakers need to have this information ahead of time in order to pass an accurate budget, because our Constitution requires a balanced budget. And if this question about whether or not a tax cut is permanent or temporary causes a $700 million swing in general fund revenues, that is something that in order to stay compliant with the Constitution, you'd have to know ahead of time. And so now is the time for the lawsuit. That was I thought an interesting and compelling reason to settle this early, as opposed to waiting until they actually did change the rate tables. Collections in paychecks were on a higher rate, and then somebody would claim now there's harm from this decision and basis for a lawsuit. So we'll follow that as it goes through the process, and I do expect it'll take a little while yet for it to go through, just because plaintiffs are looking for an answer before the end of the year. Doesn't mean they're going to get one. So it could be something that doesn't get settled until well into next year. The other thing, and so there'll be a passage of a budget and assumptions that are in the budget year that go into next year, which may or may not be accurate depending on the outcome of this lawsuit. So the other thing I wanted to touch on, a couple of policy things that are working their way through the legislature. There's an effort to revive with the Good Jobs Incentive Plan. It's one that allows for businesses to capture the income tax revenue for a period of time on jobs if they pay high enough, they reach a certain threshold above median household income in whatever region those jobs are in. And so we've been working on getting the number of jobs and the threshold before you qualify for it lowered to where a small business might be able to access that. It shouldn't be just for big companies. They might, bigger company might hire 250 people at a time, but what if 50 small businesses all hired 5 at a time? Like, are those jobs worth any less if they still, if they pay the same percentage above median household income for the region that they're in? I'd argue that it's better to have that diversity. But so as these different we're working on the big famous issues that you hear in the news, and they're controversial, and we're trying to stop something. But there's other proactive things that we're doing. Lowering the number of jobs to be created to qualify for the incentives is one of the things that's on our list. And then also research and development tax credits. So there has been an effort all year, actually for a few years, to get an R&D or research and development tax credit in the Michigan tax code. And a lot of times those are thought of in terms of big business as well, but we're trying to get this away from like the MEDC awarding our research and development tax credits and just putting it in the tax code, so that anybody who engages in research and development, regardless of what industry they're in, regardless of the scale and scope of it, to have that proportional benefit. And so we're also advocating, again, proactively. So just fight against things and that are running through the process, but trying to make good things happen. So the research and development tax credit, very active discussion, and one that we're hopeful will be passed in a way that small businesses can benefit as much as big businesses. We know that many small businesses engage in research and development. We have a lot of software companies, and even like a brewery, for example, that's developing new brews. Like there's R&D that goes into that, and they really should be treated the same in terms of their access to R&D tax credits, to the extent that Michigan makes them available for other industries or other size businesses. So a couple of things that we're working on in terms of on the other side of the ledger. Let me just run through a few things that we've been concerned about that we're trying to get either slowed down for more negotiation or just outright stopped. The leave, the 15-week family medical leave, paid family medical leave benefit is one that we really we're just looking to get pulled off the table. Now, if they want to talk about an incentive to business to provide the benefit, or change the insurance code, so there's something that businesses could buy to provide to their employees, that would be one thing. But a mandatory one size fits all across the board new tax on employers in order to fund a new public benefit is something that we're working against. And it does, I mean, it doesn't look like that's going anywhere at this point. So it does seem like it's been slowed quite a bit, where it's hard for me to imagine it getting traction during this calendar year anyway. The energy legislation, and I always have to be careful about this one because there's energy legislation moving in the House and the Senate. In the House, they moved legislation this week just out of committee. And that bill, it just dealt with siting, like where you site or where you locate solar and wind renewable projects. A lot of communities don't want those in their communities. And so those who advocate and want more renewable are saying, well, where are you going to put it? Nobody wants them in their backyard. And so the solution that moved out of House committee was to take it out of the hands of local zoning and put it into the Public Service Commission, which made up of 3 commissioners appointed by the governor. And so they would make the decision on whether something was appropriate in a local jurisdiction. Pretty controversial move in terms of that issue. Who decides where these things are cited? Not really SBAM's core issue, but in that bill, there is one aspect that we're troubled by and would like to see removed, and that is project labor agreements for the construction. Many of small businesses, for obvious reasons, are not unionized. So project labor agreements would say that in order to do these wind and solar installation projects, you'd have to have a union agreement in order to qualify. That we don't like. Of course, we think that all businesses ought to have a competitive shot at this type of work, whether it be public or private sector. So so that's one aspect. That's on the House side. On the Senate side is where the legislation appeared to be moving for a while, but it has sufficiently slowed down for what I'll call like a real negotiation. So, not trying to ram it through, but just to talk through some of the issues. And this is the one that would require, would set a date certain when the energy portfolio had to be 100% renewable. And there's enough senators that have pushed back that I think maybe it will not. There won't be an effort to get it all the way through and the Senate sent over to the House before they close up for the year. That would, and we're thankful about this because the legislation's not ready to move yet. It's environmentalists like the way that it kind of sets a deadline ahead of technology available to fill that deadline. But we're worried about reliability and cost. That's our core issue. That's our core concern. That's the reason that we get involved in energy policy. We want it to be reliable and affordable for small businesses who need it to just exist and to operate in the vast majority of industries. That positioning is something that we're pleased that the legislation is being vetted much more closely, and enough senators are asking the question like, yeah, but even if you support fully carbon free, how would we even do that under existing technology? And there are more and more that are saying, you know, we shouldn't pass regulations betting on technology that does not yet exist. And so if technology is developed in the future and they want to change the law in the future to match or employ that technology, more power to them. But in the meantime, to make sure we have reliable and affordable electricity, we shouldn't force renewable standards beyond what current technology can accommodate. And so we're feeling pretty good on several fronts here that the earlier efforts to try to engage, stop certain things, slow other things down for more discussion and negotiation is working. So we find ourselves here in the second half of October, still with a pretty full plate of public policy issues that we're watching through the process, but feels much less frantic, much less rushed as compared to the first half of the year, especially.
All right. And before we close for today, do we have any updates on the UAW strike to share?
It's been kind of a slow week. This is one of the first times when there's not been some big development. And so I guess it's noteworthy that there weren't big developments. Bill Ford did actually, who's the chair of the board at Ford and the grandson of great grandson, I think, of Henry Ford. He did visit the strike line, and Sean Fain didn't appear to like that very much. He had some kind of harsh words in response to that. But really, where Ford is at this point is saying, look, 23% pay increases is the top that we can go, and that message that was delivered by the company saying, you know, hey, look, long term, look, we have to be competitive, and if we go any further than this, it's going to undermine the future, the long term health of the company, which isn't good for anybody, including the workers. I mean, the message was delivered. It's something that is, I would say, a fairly obvious truth, but so far has not really carried the day. But the fact that there haven't been, you know, the Unifor settling in Canada, the fact that that happened, there hasn't been any big developments. You know, I don't know this, but I'm wondering, I'm hoping maybe that there's a real negotiation happening now, whereas before there's a lot of posturing. How far can the autos go? How much pain can you inflict in a short period of time? The fact that we don't see all as much of the flamboyancy today, I'm hopeful means that the union is like ready to just strike a deal. You know, everybody's cards are on the table, just got to work it out. And that's reading between the lines a little bit, and hopeful that what has been a relatively quiet several days means something good. Well, let me cover one other thing too at the federal level. So the country without a Speaker of the House right now, and I know what everybody's saying, like, how are we ever going to live without a Speaker of the House? But the thing is, like, there are certain things the federal government has to do, certain powers that the Speaker has, that the Speaker pro tem, the interim Speaker that's running the votes for the new Speaker, that has not, that person right now under current rules can't just act as Speaker in all the ways that a Speaker would have to, all the things a Speaker would have to do. So this is like the boss of the House of Representatives, the one that the body elects to run the agenda, and in a lot of ways set the agenda. So it looks more and more likely. They've been through two. So McCarthy was kicked out, and then Steve Scalise was up and then pulled back because he didn't have the support. And then his name is slipping me. The far right.
Jordan.
Yeah, Jordan. I want to
Jim
say
Jordan.
Johnson. I knew it wasn't Johnson. Jordan is. There'd been successive votes. Both of them failed, and by a wider margin on the second vote. And he just endorsed giving additional powers to the interim Speaker. And that looks more, I started saying yesterday, actually, that looked more and more likely because everybody gets to save face if the person who's already holding the gavel is just empowered to do, to run things for a while. And so that's, if I were a betting person, I'd say that's probably where the resolution is going to fall, is that the Speaker Pro Tem, this interim speaker that's acting right now will just be empowered enough for the regular rudimentary business of the House to proceed. And because it does not look likely that the Republican conference or the Republicans in Congress are going to be able to coalesce 100 or 217 of them, be able to coalesce around a single speaker candidate.
All right, well, thanks everyone for joining us today. Thanks to our sponsor, Consumers Credit Union, and to our partners, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, for joining us today. We will be back here on Monday. Have a great week.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.